Warning, this deck sucks balls. Look, I don't want to be that guy who on day one of a release of a structure deck tells you that it's probably going to be pretty average, but I'm afraid I'm about to tell you that. I'm sure someone will come up with some variant of this Relinquished deck that just has a shit ton of trap cards and doesn't use the actual skill, just plays some other random skill, maybe just combines it with Mech Knights and calls it a deck, but in general, this deck just sucks. I'm pretty certain that if I got given a bit more time and actually just explored some other decks that didn't just use the new skill, then I probably could come up with something that's actually playable. But I'm going to be honest, I'm sure every single person watching this wants to see the new skill in action, so I kind of want to show that off for you guys so that you guys could actually see it, because where's the fun in just showing you something you guys don't want to see? So I've given you the new skill with the new cards, but I'm afraid it's just going to be bad. There's just no other way to put it. The Konamis for some reason put such an extreme limitation on the skill where you can only play monsters in the main deck that are level 1 spellcasters. Yeah, this deck is just not going to be good with a limitation like that. It's too extreme. Maybe if they release some sort of new support, I'm not really sure what other Relinquished cards exist that could make this deck better, but as it stands, the skill is just unplayable. That being said, I don't want to put you off this deck too much, but it is a paid-for structure deck, so maybe wait a little bit to see if something comes in that makes it worth buying. But as it stands, it is still a pretty fun deck, so if you've got $1 billion and don't mind just, cashing out on a structure deck, here you go. So here's today's deck list. Now just a reminder before getting to the deck list, if you enjoyed today's video and see more content just like this in the future, especially if you're a returning viewer, as apparently only about 50% of people watching this or even subscribe to the channel, then nearly all of you are returning viewers who have seen my stuff before. So if you are enjoying the content, can you come back to the channel and want to see more content just like this in the future, remember to leave a like on this video and consider subscribing to the channel down below. Alright, let's get into the deck list. Now I don't want to be too pessimistic when I'm talking about it, but it's probably going to come out quite a bit. So, unfortunately, this deck is built around the brand new skill, Millennium-Eyes Illusion, which could be such a good skill, but like I mentioned, it has a really insane limitation on the bottom. The limitation is, basically, this skill can only be used if you begin the duel with a deck excluding extra deck that contains no monsters other than total of at least 10 level 1 spellcaster type monsters or monsters with Relinquished in their text. Obviously, that's pretty damn extreme. You're basically only going to be playing your Relinquished monsters, and that's it. You can play like Piper, but other than that, there's just nothing else you can play. Plus, half your deck actually has to be set to these monsters. You can't be running a shit ton of trap cards or something. It's just, this skill is just too damn restrictive. I think this deck list is probably going to be better without this skill. It'd be so nice if we could run Kaijus in this list, but Konami just said no. Alright, so let's go into the actual skill though. If you control Millennium-Eyes Idol, you can use one of the following effects once per turn. Return one card from your hand to your deck, and set one Black Illusion Ritual, one Polymerization to the field from the deck. Only one copy of the cards of the same name can be set during the duel with this skill. So essentially, you can only do it once per card, so once per Poly and once per Black Illusion Ritual. Then you can add one Relinquished to your hand from the deck. The other activation of the skill is kind of amusing. Return one monster from your hand or field to the deck, and then play one Bickuribox from the extra deck. So essentially you just take your Millennium-Eyes Idol that you might not potentially be using, put it back in the deck, and swap it out for a 2300 beta, which does actually come up quite a bit, as you'll see during the gameplay. So this deck list has a whole bunch of new cards. I won't talk about Relinquished itself, as I'm sure you guys all know what this card does by now, and if you don't, feel free to read it yourself. You don't actually get to use this card's effect all that much anyway, as the main one you're going to be using is going to be your Millennium-Eyes, so you won't get to use this card all that much anyway. But let's go through the actual new stuff. So the first new card we're getting is Millennium-Eyes Illusionist, which is one of the best cards in the deck, if not the best card. This card is mental. Quick effect. You can discard this card and target one effect monster your opponent controls. Equip that target to an Eyes Restrict Fusion monster or Relinquished you control as if it were equipped by that monster's effect. If an Eyes Restrict Fusion monster or Relinquished is special summoned, add this card from your graveyard to your hand. This is not optional. You can use each effect on Millennium-Eyes once per turn. So it's essentially a hand trap that can equip monsters to your restrict monsters, which is pretty damn good. So if your opponent ever has something on the field, you can yoink it, put it underneath your card just by having this in your hand. And your opponent obviously can't MST it like other back row because it's a hand trap. It's also really good at being used as material for your fusion summoning, except when you're banishing it with a Relinquished Fusion. But if you're using like a normal poly or using a Black Illusion Ritual to use it as material, you'll get it back to your hand as well. So very, very strong card. Next up, we have Millennium-Eyes Idol. Once per turn, quick effect, you can activate this effect to look at your opponent's hand. Also, this card's name becomes Millennium-Eyes Idol until the end phase. So keep in mind, remember the skill does need a Millennium-Eyes Idol on the field to activate. So essentially, we now have your 3 copies of your normal monster. You have an unexpected die to search for your normal monster. And we have the Millennium-Eyes Idol, which can just look at your opponent's hand and change its name to Millennium-Eyes Idol. If this card is banished or sent to the graveyard by a card effect, you can target one effect monster your opponent controls, equip that effect monster to one Eyes Restrict or one Relinquished monster you control that cannot be normal summoned. While equipped by this effect, that monster gains attack equal to the attack of the equipped monster. You only use this effect of Millennium-Eyes once per turn. So keep that in mind because it's pretty important because you can use this during your opponent's turn if you banish it using your Relinquished Fusion, which we'll go through now. This card allows you to fusion summon one Eyes Restrict fusion monster from your extra deck by banishing materials from it from your hand, field, and or graveyard. So keep in mind, if you're doing something like a Polymerization on your first turn, using the materials, you put them in the graveyard, you can then use this as a quick effect during your opponent's turn to summon out one of your other fusion monsters. Alright, during your main phase, you can banish this card from your graveyard, the target one effect monster your opponent controls, equip that target to an Eyes Restrict fusion monster or Relinquished you control, as if it were equipped by that monster's effect. You only use each effect of Relinquished Fusion once per turn. As for the rest of the deck list, it's all pretty old cards you guys have probably seen before, so I won't be going through it now, but if you guys don't know what they do, they are pretty simple and they're not too hard to learn, and you'll see how I use them during the gameplay anyway. So without further ado, let's get into the gameplay. Alright, let's get into the replays. Now, don't be fooled by these replays, as they're going to look pretty damn insane, because I do a lot of cool stuff versus a lot of pretty powerful decks. Don't be fooled by it. You also notice that my rank will drop over these replays as it goes on. That's because it literally did. This deck list isn't good. I'm telling you right now, I don't think the skill is that playable, so don't be fooled by these POG replays. But they are going to look really fun, so if you want to play this deck list just for fun, it is a really fun deck. Alright. And also keep in mind, remember what happened to the Rose Dragon skill. Could happen to this one, so you never know. Also, new box support might make this deck absolutely insane. You never know. Alright, so first thing we do, activate our skill, because we've now got a Millennium-Eyes on the field. Because we've used this effect, it's now turned into a Millennium-Eyes Idol that's in our opponent's hand, so we can activate the skill. Adding a copy of our Polymerization to the field and our Relinquished to hand, so now we can poly out our Millennium-Eyes Restrict. Summon to the field, this card using material, come back to hand, and pass to our opponent's turn. Opponent tries to use a monster effect, we can suck it up with Millennium-Eyes Restrict, and negate its effects. He's going to use Sign Up Mining, discarding a Jaguar to then add his Gazelle to hand. Gazelle can now summon itself, and when it uses its effect, we're going to yoink it, also negating its effect. He summons his Mir, still able to make plays even after having both his monsters sucked up. Honestly, pretty crazy. Beats over my monster and passes back. I draw a fusion, which is really good, because now I can summon out another copy of my Millennium-Eyes Restrict. Add this card back to hand. Also, because that card was banished, it can now target an opponent's monster and suck it up. And yeah, the end, he just concedes. So you can probably see that this deck list has a lot of potential to be good, and I think if you're not using the skill, just using the Millennium-Eyes or the fusion cards in general might actually be good enough to reach like King of Games or something like that. I just think with the skill, it's too restrictive, so any limitation, any like reducing on the limitations or any new support or something, maybe you'll get a really, really insane deck, because this deck can do some really cool things, as you're seeing right now. It's also a really good deck at potentially board breaking, sometimes. The fact that you have to actually get your normal monster on the field to use your skill, though, is pretty rough, as if your opponent just sees the normal monster, they're like, huh, remove that, you can't use your skill anymore, so yeah, just, there's a lot of interesting things about this deck list to make it really average. Alright, adding the poly to hand. Before using the poly, I'm going to, I think I am anyway. No, I'm not, I'm going to fusion summon out my Millennium-Eyes Restrict. Add this card to hand. Set my Relinquished Fusion, and then pass the turn. I could have turned this into a Link 1 if I wanted to, and then I would have had the 2 materials and graveyard to go into my other monster anyway, but I wanted to keep this on the field so I can activate my skill on the next turn, or so I can turn it into the other dude on the next turn. The guy you'll probably see me summon this duel anyway. If I don't summon it this duel, you'll see it later anyway. The other fusion monster they let you summon. The Bickuribox, sorry. He summons a card, doesn't want to use any effects, he's worried I'm going to yoink it, so I'm going to activate my hand trap, yoink his monster, and equip it to myself. Bickuribox by shoving a card back in, so I now technically have lethal on the field. Unfortunately, he has a mystical space Typhoon. Now we're in a bit of a rough spot, because we've only got one dude on field, but we do have our Relinquished Fusion still set, which is a really powerful card at getting out the other Relinquished monster sometimes. He tries to use its effect, just gonna yoink it. Now, right there, I actually could have used my Relinquished Fusion, I believe, because actually, never mind, I couldn't have, ignore me. It's either normal monster and graveyard. I'm gonna use it right here to summon out my Millennium-Eyes Restrict. Is that procs the effect, add this card back to hand, use the idol and graveyard to then target a card and suck it up. And I can also use the spell in graveyard to target his monster and suck it up as well. And he's just dead. Alright. Game number 3. Alright, so this one, I don't remember. Alright, I know one of these replays was pretty mediocre. Might be this one. Actually, this is probably not a started play. This is like a Ties the Bind skill. I get a whole Polymerization, add the Relinquished to hand. Fusion summon out. Oh, sorry, we're going to link summon out to our Imduk this time. Polymerization, go into my Millennium-Eyes Restrict, because Millennium-Eyes Restrict requires Relinquish plus an effect monster, so if you are going to play this deck, you definitely have to play one copy of your Imduk, just so you can turn your idols into effect monsters. Alright, pass back. MST trying to pop a back row, I can just use it in response, and he pops the other one as well. Not too bad though, because now I can summon out my Millennium-Eyes Restrict. So the reason I summon this one in particular and not another copy of Millennium-Eyes Restrict is because this card prevents all other monsters from attacking. So even though my cards have 0 attack, my opponent can't swing into them. And this card still got its monster negate by sucking up one of my opponent's cards. So we're still pretty safe if our opponent doesn't completely pop off, which I think this guy did. Oh, I remember this replay now. I won't spoil it. This had a pretty amusing ending. Tries to use his card's effect, I'm going to suck it up so he can't add Gazelle to hand. Unfortunately, as you can probably tell by how he's playing, he just had the Gazelle. Because of course he did. Absolute most skilled player around. Alright, sends his Sunlight Great Jaguar to the graveyard, goes into Sunlight Wolf, summons back the Jaguar. Adding a card to hand. Going to a link monster so he has 2 links, so he can go into his copy of Ningirsu. And because he can't read, he removes the wrong monster. Tries to Ties that Binds the Swinging, goes to battle phase and finds out, I can't do anything. So I suck it up. Swap it out, bring out my boy, and he's gone. Yep, good reading there, buddy. Alright, final 3 plays. So this one must be the mediocre one. So I think the next one's actually quite good. Alright. So unexpected die, adding my Thousand Eyes to the field. Get my Polymerization. Another card you could run over Unexpected Die is Super Polymerization, which is actually a pretty damn good card in this deck, since your dudes are actually pretty generic. This card only requires 1 effect monster plus a Relinquish, so he's pretty damn good with Super Poly. But I found there wasn't really enough room in this deck list, plus I wanted to have 1 Expected Die, just so I'd have 7 copies of my Thousand Eyes Idol, so I can basically get it every single duel, because 6 is just not quite enough for me. But you could run Super Poly over this if you don't have Unexpected Die. Alright. Polymerization, bring out my Millennium-Eyes. And my Illusionist. Link summon Imduk. Set the card and pass. Night Beams me, which is a bit rough. We have the hand trap, so we're still feeling pretty safe. Suck up his Goki so he can't do anything else. Go a nice idol. Swap it out. Bring up my beta, and there's lethal on field. Alright. I also find this deck has a lot of weakness if you don't draw the hand trap in particular. It can feel pretty rough. If you don't draw the hand trap or this card, you literally won't have any kind of disruption at all, so... Well, you can if you have your restrict, but that's if they just normal summon a monster that can beat over it, it can feel pretty rough. So, yeah, that's another major downside of this deck list that's not really fixable outside of running a bunch of back row, but if you're running a bunch of back row, you can't run MST. If you're not running MST, you lose to one trap card, so... Yeah, I don't want to keep shit-talking this deck, but... Yeah. It's not great, okay. It's good enough to demote this fella though, poor guy, and he's a demotion match. Alright. Mechalot Assembly searching for his Weasel, which could be pretty annoying if that was on the field, considering it negates spell cards. Summons two dudes, sets one card, and passes. I draw MST. MST is back row. Unexpected die, summon out my Thousand Eyes Idol. Look at his hand, see what's in there. Oh, sorry, never mind. I take the skill, that's the wrong card. Either way. As you'll notice, by the way, every one of these duels, I seem to be searching for Polymerization, because you just want to get this card on the field most of the time. It's just the better card. You could search for the Relinquished that sucks things up, like the ritual spell, but in general, it's just nowhere near as good as having this card on the field in combination with this card. So I don't think I actually search for the ritual spell once, despite running it. I do run a second copy though, because you do want to use the skill multiple times, and because you can only use the skill once per card, so once per poly, once per ritual spell, it's better to use both of them, but yeah. I'm only running one ritual spell for a reason. You don't ritual summon much with this deck list. Alright, summon the Millennium-Eyes Illusionist, add this card back to hand. Fusion summon out the Chad, Thousand Eyes Restrict, sucking up another card. Beating over his monster, and I could have sucked up the other one, but I decided to keep this in hand in case my opponent actually does anything, since I don't want to have just one negate during my opponent's turn, so I decided to let him do his thing. He does destroy this with his continuous spell though, but that doesn't matter because he can't swing in thanks to this card's effect. So I suck up his other monster, beat him up again. Keep in mind though, this card also stops your monsters from attacking as well, only this card can attack. MST's my dude again, really do not care. Pass again. I could have linked summoned if I wanted to, but it wouldn't head lethal, so I just didn't bother. Summons out his big boss monster, tried to go to battle phase to use its effect, realized he couldn't, and was like, yeah, I'm a concede. Alright guys, that's going to do it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to like, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. I do want to again specify that this deck list could be better, and there's probably going to be variants of Relinquished that are a lot better than this deck list that don't use the skill. So don't lose all faith in Relinquished just yet. It is only day one. So hopefully this deck is better, or maybe I'm completely wrong and someone builds something using the skill that's completely busted. Again, it's only day one, so I could be completely wrong, and I hope I am. Alright guys, thank you guys for watching, subscribe, and yeah, laters.
Hey, big brother, can I watch SpongeBob? Shut up, Mokuba. I'm busy flagging YouTube videos to compensate for the fact that I have an extremely small penis. Oh.